One of the questions that came up at the end of the last session was about immigrants as human beings, not just as numbers. And one of the things I want to encourage all our panelists to talk about is their own human and personal experience. But to get to that point, I want to move from the personal to the abstract for just 1 second. The book that I wrote that Jim was kind enough to mention was about the experience of Japanese Americans during World War II. And I'm sure most of you know that after Pearl Harbor, over 100,000 Japanese Americans were forcibly removed from their homes and thrown into camps where they spent most of World War II, that is, most of the 3 years after Pearl Harbor. As you can imagine, this was a huge dislocation to the Japanese American community. But the book I wrote was not about that. The book I wrote was about a much lesser known part of that story, which was, out of that experience, a segregated unit of American soldiers called the 442, the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, was formed out of volunteers, about half of whom came out of the camps. And this unit went on to become the single most decorated unit for its size in World War II. And in writing this book, I was struck, as I'm sure you are, by the fact that the very men whose families, and in some cases themselves, had been treated in the worst possible fashion by their own country, nonetheless volunteered to fight for the very country that had betrayed them. And I saw in this a story about what it means to be a citizen, because we've had a lot of talk about the formal process of citizenship, but being a citizen is more than just taking an oath, and being a citizen is more than just meeting the formal requirements of citizenship. One of the suggestions that came out in the last panel was that this process takes several years, and it often does. But it also takes a commitment on the part of individuals that is exemplified by what the members of the 442 did, but can be found across all spheres of life and not just in combat. Combat provides the most dramatic example of it, but we see people making choices every day, large and small, that add up to what it means to be a citizen. We forget that the concept of citizenship is both a very old and a very new one. It arose in the time of the Greek polis and the Roman state, but then it really disappeared for about 2,000 years. We didn't talk about citizens under the emperors and the kings. They were not citizens, they were subjects. It was only with the advent of the Enlightenment and the spread of democracy and the American Revolution that citizenship became an issue. And it became an issue because freedom became an issue. It became an issue because free men come together, free men and women, come together and form a state. And that imposes a special obligation, not just on the state, but on the individual to decide who a citizen is and how you become a citizen. So a lot of what's going on in the public debate now, concerns the specific policy aspects of that. But there's a much larger philosophical question about what does it mean for me to be a citizen? What is it going to cost me, not just in terms of the $680, but in terms of my identity as a human being? So this abstract question of citizenship that I saw being worked out in very dramatic fashion in the book that I wrote is something that all of these panelists have something to say, either out of both their own personal experience or things they've witnessed. So I want to move to that question, that is the question of citizenship as involving responsibilities and in some cases involving sacrifice. And it's a great honor and pleasure to be here with two members, one active and one recently retired, of the military who can speak to that. But other members of this panel will also be speaking to it in terms that are intensely personal about what it means to be a citizen. So I'd like to begin with Miguel Howe, whom many of you may know as the Director of Military Service Initiative here at the Bush Institute. He had, before that, a very long and distinguished career in the U.S. Army, which he'll, I'm sure, refer to in his talk. But in talking to him before we started this panel, he and I were both very struck by something that President Bush said in his remarks this morning. that the members of the armed service who were immigrants had risked it all the first time to become an immigrant. They had given up their home country, they had changed their language, they had settled in a new land. And by joining the armed services, they were risking it all a second time to make it possible for their children and future generations to have the same opportunities that they did. So I'd like Miguel to talk a little about that, both in terms of his experience here at the George Bush Institute, but also, more importantly, in terms of his experience as an Army officer.
Thank you, Robert. I'd like to start out by wishing congratulations to our newest citizens, particularly Corporal Villa Serran and Specialist Sanya Liu, but to all of our newest citizens, because my experience over the past 24 years of active military service has been that our most passionate, engaged, service-oriented, and patriotic citizens and service members are our newest. And so as the director of the Military Service Initiative here, I have the honor and the responsibility to lead the Bush Institute's effort to honor the service and sacrifice of all of our post-9/11 veterans, military service members, and their families, but also to empower and unite the efforts of nonprofits, businesses, universities, individual citizens, and communities to improve the well-being of those veteran service members and their families, but also to unleash their potential to continue to serve as national assets in their communities after their military service is over. And so since September 11, 2001, 2.3 million members of this country have donned the uniform or worn the uniform in Iraq or Afghanistan. And since 1973, we have been an all-volunteer force. So every young American, and I think Stacky and I would still like to consider ourselves young, but every young American who raises their right hand and cites that oath of enlistment or that oath of commissioning, which sounds very, very similar to the oath of citizenship that we heard this morning, has really, I think, demonstrated that courage that Robert described on two levels before they even have set foot in places like Iraq, Afghanistan, or wherever else our nation has called them to ensure our freedoms. And so those 2.3 million, and there's yet another million who will leave the service in the next 5 years, but that 2.3 million includes approximately 100,000 legal immigrants who were not yet citizens, as we saw today with the young Lance Corporal and Specialist who became citizens. And so that's a pretty significant percentage of our military who, before they even become citizens, have made that commitment and had the courage. One of the mottos of the first units that I served with, an infantry unit in Hawaii, was deeds, not words. And so as you spoke to, Robert, in terms of actions that come with the words of responsibilities of citizenship, clearly they have demonstrated through their actions and their willingness to serve, knowing that they are going into harm's way, that they are likely to go into harm's way, and may be asked to make the ultimate sacrifice by doing so in order to achieve that hope and desire for freedom and opportunity for themselves and their families, but now truly an act of love, I think, to do that as well for all of us and all of our future generations as well. And so until I recently retired, I recently retired out of the 7th Special Forces Group. It's an Army unit that has responsibility for special operations activities in both Latin America as well as Afghanistan. And because of the imperative to be able to operate by, with, and through our partners in all of those nations, there's an impetus to have a language ability and a cultural affinity and understanding for where you're going to work and your brothers and sisters and your allies whom you're going to work with. And so because of that, we both attract and actively recruit for, within that particular unit, a Hispanic population. And so approximately 35% of that unit are all Latinos, but from throughout, whose heritage is throughout all of Latin America. And since 2004, our unit has had 40 soldiers killed in combat operations in Afghanistan. And those 40 heroes include men with names like Cervantes, Morales, Munoz, Caban, Daza Chacon, Elizares, Gonzalez, Vasquez, and Nunez. Sergeant First Class Dave Nunez, a father of 2 young boys, is an immigrant from Mexico. And so as a new immigrant and as a naturalized citizen, he chose to demonstrate through his actions not only what he recognized as the opportunities that came with him and with his family when he came to the United States, but the responsibilities that he had as a citizen to give back. And so David served on 2 tours in Kosovo, a tour in Iraq, and 2 tours in Afghanistan. And in his last tour in Afghanistan, in May 29, 2008, in Farah province in Afghanistan, his team, his Special Forces detachment, and the Afghan National Army members that he was serving with ran into a very significant ambush from the Taliban. They were very significantly outnumbered at that time, and so they were trapped. Their convoy was trapped in an ambush site. And so David, again, deeds not words, made the ultimate sacrifice, ensuring the safety and the livelihood of his brothers, regardless of their nation of origin, that they would survive. And so David's vehicle came under heavy fire. He manned the machine gun to put fires on the enemy and to suppress the enemy while receiving significant fire himself. His vehicle burst into flames. And because of his concern for his brothers that were still in that vehicle, and because munitions were starting to explode, David started to throw those munitions out the back of the vehicle. And so he stayed with that vehicle to ensure that his brothers that were with him would not perish due to the fire and the explosions and the fire, small arms fire that they were receiving. And David succumbed to his wounds during that. And for his actions, he was honored and recognized with the Silver Star, the 3rd highest award for valor that we have within the military. But David is just one example, and there are countless from this era, from all of our preceding and from the subsequent of acts of love for their brother service men and women, for the country that they have adopted, as you described so well, even under the most pressing of personal, arduous circumstances. And so when I think of what you talked about, Robert, in terms of responsibility and service and identity in terms of citizenship, I have been blessed with the opportunity for the past 24 years to see and experience that firsthand, whether in Iraq or Afghanistan or throughout Latin America, all the places that I've had the opportunity to travel to, but back at home within the United States every day during training. I also served for a time, I was responsible for the Army's recruiting efforts in Southern California. And so over the course of 26 months, we had the opportunity to bring over 5,000 young people to Army service. And so we were responsible for an area of the 5 counties of Southern California, and I know California is not necessarily the right word to say in the forum today, I guess, but there are some great Americans that are living and serving out of Southern California for sure. And so that area spans a very broad socioeconomic spectrum and some very vibrant immigrant communities. And so I had the opportunity to see these young people balance both the opportunity and the service and the sense of duty and obligation that they had to commit to serve in the U.S. military. And there are some myths and stereotypes that military service is for those who have no other option. And nothing could be further from the truth. As we sit here today, less than 25% of all young Americans age 18 to 24 are eligible for military service because they don't meet the mental, physical, or moral qualifications that it takes to serve. So we don't just take anybody. So mental is a high school level education and a sufficient score on the ASVAB test. Physical standards in terms of height, weight, and basic fitness, and moral standards in terms of challenges or problems with the law. And so it really is an opportunity for the select few, those who are willing to do it. But for those who are willing to serve, it does come with tremendous opportunity, whether that is the economic opportunity of a job or a career and the benefits that come with military service, whether it comes from serving within a values-based organization. Within the Army, ours was loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. The opportunity for education and for training in new skills. And so there's the technical skills that some of which we require within our communities and to help our economy grow that we've heard about earlier. But then there's also some of the intangible skills of leadership and management and planning and situational awareness, judgment, and decision-making under the most arduous of circumstances. The opportunity of being in a true meritocracy. When Dave lost his life, nobody cared whether or not he was an immigrant or a citizen. They cared about who he was as a person and as a brother and as a sister. So while those may be sources of those are key sources of our personal identities for the team, for the family, for those that are serving in uniform, what matters is who you really are as a person, not where you came from or what your first language is. I guess the last thing, Robert, I'll say in terms of we need immigrants within our service. We need them as a reflection of who we are as a nation. We need them for their talent and their skills. When I was in recruiting, I also had a mission to recruit 40 non-citizens, legal residents, legal immigrants, so that we could leverage their language and cultural expertise, which I had previously, not being aware of this program, leveraged in Iraq and then subsequently leveraged in Afghanistan. And so there are specific technical skills that they provide to make our military even stronger. But it is that commitment, that sense of obligation, service, and patriotism that my experience has been the true strength of our immigrants serving with us.
Thank you very much. That's a very good summary of the contributions of immigrants to our military. I was very struck by the comment you made that the oath that you take on entering the service is very similar to the oath that you take when becoming a citizen. And our next panelist, Captain Eustaquio Castro-Mendoza, did in fact take both oaths. He took the oath of citizenship when you were, in your early 20s, and shortly thereafter entered the military. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the qualities of your immigrant life that both led you to make both oaths and that contributed to your obvious success since you're near the end of your 30-year career.
Yes. Thank you, Bob. Thank you very much. And what I'd like to do, first of all, is just thank the George W. Bush Foundation for inviting me here to this very important event. It's a pleasure for me to participate in this distinguished panel. I'm an immigrant from Mexico. Arrived here in 1962. And I think that my service or my choosing to serve this country was for a number of reasons. One was my general upbringing. My parents my mother was born in Bryan, Texas, by the way. She went to Mexico as a child, married my father in Mexico, and then my father came back to the U.S. to work under the Bracero program in the late 50s, early 60s. And so myself and my brother Isaac here on the panel, we are products of a different society. But what brought us here was our parents' desire for us to have a better life. And one of the driving factors for my entire family, which is a very large family, I'll let Isaac talk to some of that, I'm sure, but was a pursuit for education and a pursuit of a contribution to a country, which to us was very foreign in the very beginning. I mean, moving from northern Mexico into, North Texas to a little town called Old Glory, Texas, was an experience that I will remember forever, but it was a transforming experience for myself. And from that transforming experience came my deep desire to be a productive member of the society. I actually had no intention early on to become a military officer. My intent was to get a PhD in biology, and I was pursuing a PhD in biology at Virginia Tech at the time. But I said, well, you know what? I've always wanted to fly for the U.S. Navy, and I've got to do that. And I'm nearing the age limit for doing this, so I've got to do it now. And so as I went into the flight program at Pensacola, Florida, I didn't get my wings of gold, but I was so in love with the United States Navy and the military in general, because the U.S. Navy and the military in general are like a family. And I think a lot of immigrants are seeking to belong to a family type of grouping. And in this case, it happens to be the United States of America, the most wonderful country in this world, bar none. And I've been to many, many of those countries. And I have known many, many people from all walks in other countries. And what I also think, and it's important to understand, is then why is it that so many want to choose to come to this country? And as Miguel talked about, why they would want to serve in our military. And the reason is because, not just because of opportunity, but because they truly have fallen in love with America. And it's those ideals of democracy that we value that we may sometimes take for granted. They don't. As an immigrant, I never took that for granted. I mean, I came here knowing that there was opportunity. And I was a child, and I grew up here in Texas, to adulthood. So it's not just about getting an opportunity, it's about serving. It's about true patriotism. That's what makes people from Afghanistan come to America, want to go back to Afghanistan as soldiers wearing the uniform, and give up their lives for that country. We have had citizens who have become citizens posthumously. They have given their lives in the military. The military has recently facilitated people coming to this country and serving in the military and then earning their citizenship through that service, which I think is a very good thing. And as Miguel said also, that has given us a huge diversity within our military. And we don't see in the military, we don't see that diversity as a hindrance. We see it very much as a very positive factor. And Miguel has described some of the positive factors derived from that diversity. Anyway, I think I'm getting off a little bit topic, but
you're very much on topic.
I am an immigrant,
and you stole my transition, which was I wanted to introduce the next. I'm going to skip over the next two to get to the last person on the panel there. I wanted to surprise everybody by telling everybody that there were two brothers on the panel, notwithstanding the fact that their last names are slightly different due to some vagaries of immigration. But the next panelist, Isaac Castro, who is in fact the brother of Eustaquio Castro-Mendoza, is himself a very distinguished man in a totally different area, which is public service. And he is now the mayor of the city of Hamlin, Texas. But before that, he had a unique distinction in the so-called big country around Abilene. And I won't steal his punchline. I'll let him tell that story. But he's had a very distinguished career as a politician and public servant, and has been a groundbreaker in the story that I'm going to let him tell.
Thank you. Well, that may be, I guess I might not be able to fit the bill there, but thank you all for staying and for being here. I wanted to brag about my tie. You can't see the insignia there, but it's W04. It's my George W. Bush tie from when he was renominated for a second term in New York City. My brother and I grew up in a large family of 12. The first 6 of us were born in Mexico, and the other 6, of course, born in Texas, on a farm near Old Glory, Texas, where we grew up. I'll skip forward, and then you can ask me any other questions, Bob. But whenever I first got out of law school in 1980, I was convinced to come back home to Stonewall County by the county judge and the commissioner's court. He said the commissioner's court would appoint me the county attorney. And so I did that, came home, and June 2nd, 1980, I was appointed the Stonewall County attorney. It didn't seem all that remarkable to me until later on, because I read in the newspaper a few year after that. I don't know if it was 2 years or 4 years, but I read in the Abilene Reporter News. I don't believe everything I hear, everything I read, but I read in the Abilene Reporter News that there was a Hispanic a justice of the peace that had gotten elected there in Abilene, and that he was the first Hispanic public official in the Big Country. Stonewall County is part of the Big Country, part of the Abilene area. And so at that point, if that fact was true, then I knew that I was actually the first minority office holder in the area. And so that became a little more remarkable to me whenever I found that out. And then I tried to verify that there weren't any other officials that were minorities. And sure enough, there weren't any others at the time. It wasn't remarkable to me that I was in that position so much as it was remarkable that 4 older white men would appoint a 23-year-old Hispanic to such an important position. And so that's what became to me the most important factor. And now a lot of things have changed over the last 33 years. But that was the beginning of my career in public service and my political career as well.
Well, I think the point you made really needs underscoring, which is that in what was regarded as a conservative part of Texas that had not known a lot of change for a long time, 4 white old men picked this then young Hispanic man to become their prosecutor. And I think that speaks very much about this complicated but potentially rewarding, usually potentially rewarding, relationship between new immigrants and the people they are trying to become part of. And I'd like our next guest, if I can sort of hop, skip, and jump a little bit, Vinay Jain, who is a distinguished oncologist with over 20 years of clinical practice, who has also done lots of other things in founding companies, both for profit and for nonprofit. but is himself a relatively recent immigrant who I think in our conversation suggested that he had somewhat the same kind of welcoming experience as a new immigrant. And I wonder if you could talk about that.
Well, I want to thank the Bush Institute for inviting me. My wife is here. She's also an immigrant. And we are very pleased to represent the immigrant community and be chosen for this panel. My story in America began in 1984 when I came here, like you were saying, to get further education. I had just finished my medical degree in New Delhi, and I always wanted to be a cancer specialist. I think probably I was a teenager, and it was a dream, and it's still a dream. I'm sort of living the dream every day. And America has the best schools, the best universities, and the best hospitals, and still does. I was lucky enough to be accepted by a distinguished hospital in Ohio, the Cleveland Clinic, which is one of the hospitals that's very much in the forefront of advances in healthcare. And spent 3 years in Ohio, and then went to the National Cancer Institute, became a government servant. Actually, for 5 years, I worked as an oncology researcher and an expert in lymphoma. All throughout this time, I was amazed by the inclusiveness and the acceptance of the society. Americans are pretty special people, and I can absolutely second the statement that was made. I've been to many countries, and I've lived in many countries, and people are good everywhere. But there is something special about the average American. The average American is straightforward and honest and helpful and want other people to succeed. So the desire of success is shared, and the thought process is that your success helps me and my success helps you. So it's a shared success story. So I was helped by so many people, it's hard to count. But each step of the way, somebody helped me, guided me, gave me opportunities. And then just by pure chance, actually, we were thinking of moving to California or to moving to Florida, but we ended up coming to Texas. We came to Dallas, and the gentleman who brought me here was the first oncologist in Dallas and is still practicing. He is now 70, 80 years old and is working hard. And our journey has been a journey of constant surprise and constant, we just feel like, you rub your eyes, this is happening to you. Is this the dream that I dreamt, when we first left our countries? We are doing a number of things. I'm still very involved in the fight against cancer. I'm in the middle of developing a couple of cancer drugs for the treatment of acute leukemia and lymphoma. I'm a lymphoma specialist by training. And if we are fortunate, maybe in a few years, we will offer some new medicines to patients who are struck by this disease. The city of Dallas, we have been here 20 years. All our 3 children were born here, and we very much think of this as home now. This has been a great city for us to live. We have made many friends here, and we are very involved in giving back to this country and this community that has accepted us and made us not feel like immigrants. We very much feel that we belong to this community, and with a little bit of luck and some effort, we hope that we can contribute in a small way for the next generation of people who choose to come here and live here. So I think.
Thank you.
Thank
That's
you.
a very heartfelt and personal perspective on this. If we can move a little bit towards the organizational, I'd like to introduce our final panelist, Suzii Paynter, who is the executive coordinator of the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship, which turns out to be much bigger than I ever imagined, and you can tell us a little bit about that. One of the things she said to me in conversation was that one of their strategies was Bibles, badges, and business, which is a way of uniting different constituencies behind the move to integrate immigrants. The nonprofit world, of course, has always been very much at the forefront of the process that we've described here of bringing new Americans into society. And I'm sure your organization has done huge amounts for that. But I'm curious, not so much from an organizational perspective, but from a personal perspective, the people who have benefited from this, how do they benefit? What do they do with the things that you help them do? And how do they move on to give back themselves from the activities that you help them with?
Well, I want to first of all say thanks again for including me on this panel and reference a couple of things. First of all, a remark that President Bush made in his comments today that was tweeted. I saw it on my Twitter account. And he said that immigrants bring renewal to our national character and they add vitality to our culture. And I could say sincerely that in the faith community and as a natural dissemination and beautiful part of our culture, that immigrants have brought renewal to the church and to the character, to the moral character of our congregations, and that they add vitality to our culture. And primarily, one of the most important aspects of this is the aspect of servant leadership. What you've heard today, and the title of this, How Immigrants Serve, they serve as leaders. And this tremendous, yesterday's immigrants, new immigrants, are today's theologians, pastors, committed and compassionate missionaries. Yesterday's new immigrants are chaplains in the military, in hospice and hospitals. Yesterday's new immigrants are our emissaries around the world in compassion ministries, in cultures and communities that would never accept another missionary. And so in the faith community, the beautiful gift of the new immigrant is for the renewal of our culture and for the renewal of faith. One of the other comments that I would also kind of connect to was Dr. Pastor's comment when he ended the last panel, and he made that compelling statement to bridge to our panel that when you stand up and say the oath, it's for the beliefs that you have in a country. And I would say the first 16 words of the Bill of Rights are themselves a commitment to religious liberty and to personal freedoms. And I think this connection between belief for many people who've come to our country and serve in our communities of faith, their faith experience, they're spiritually connected to the people they've left behind, to the homes they've left behind. It may be their only connection. And so they're citizens of two kingdoms. They're working towards being citizens of this kingdom, but then also in the kingdom of God, the bigger kingdom. And somebody was asking me a while ago, how did you get involved in immigration? And for me, my commitment came as a Texas Baptist because of our number of Hispanic congregations. We have over 1,200 Hispanic Baptist congregations in the state of Texas. In addition to Spanish-speaking congregations here in Texas, we've got 425 congregations that speak a language other than Spanish and English every Sunday morning. So the beautiful nature of the kingdom of God, even here in this one state, is diverse. So looking again at those elements, so how do our immigrants serve? They serve, first of all, the connection again to the discussion about English language classes and the movement of this 1/3, this 8 million. How do we help people move from this 8 million of people who could receive naturalization services, but they're faced with all of these problems. Many of them have gone in their communities. They've been approached by an unscrupulous notario or someone who's promised them immigration help and taken their money and given them no help. So to advocate within our congregations in the state of Texas and around the country, the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship, we have churches in 18 states and regions and 130 field personnel around the world. So to bring those immigration services into a congregation through accredited representative, Bureau of Immigration Appeals, accredited training, so that the immigrants in that area can access low-cost, trustworthy services at a congregational level. We work closely with our trusted partners in Catholic Charities, who are legal experts, do a lot of the certification, the training. Eric Cohen's group is certifying our trainings for the people within our congregations. But our immigrant communities are seeking not just to serve for themselves, but as you've seen from all these wonderful testimonies, how they multiply their service as leaders for each other and for other people. And so these free services that are offered on Saturday mornings, if you go by Hispanic churches in your towns, on Saturday morning, you'll see lines of people waiting around the building, waiting patiently to get in to have their status adjustment reviewed for free by an accredited rep in that church. And so these immigration services, as a part of the faith community, is one way that we're helping to promote that servant leadership and to hopefully bridge these gaps, these needs that we've heard about today. So it's not just a worship service, but it is also a way of joining hands with brothers and sisters towards that. And I would say in our, my husband ends his worship service every Sunday with a benediction that says, risk something big for something good. Mm-hmm. And I feel like in this culture, in our culture of faith, I think we're asking our congregations also to risk something big for something good, to teach an English class, to provide a citizenship class, to reach out with immigration services, to reach out and support these individuals. Their stories are heroic, and their hearts and their servant leadership truly revitalize our faith communities.
I think that's a good transition to the next section of what I would like to talk about. This risking something big to bring about something good is certainly exemplified by Dr. Jain, who came here as a young adult. And I'm curious if you could tell us a little bit about what in your background, what in your family, what in the culture of your country would enable you, would make it possible for you to take that kind of risk?
That's a great question. I don't know if I can answer that well, but I can give it a shot. I think we are all defined by the people we meet, the peers we work with. We all need role models, and we are influenced by our role models. Actually, if you look back in your life, you will always, sometimes subconsciously or consciously, you look up to people. And there have been a number of Nobel laureates that work in America that actually were trained and did their undergraduate training in India. This country gave them the opportunity to use their gifts, their skills, and allowed them to succeed, for the good of society. So I always wanted to work hard, to study hard, and hopefully, I was happy to, if I could do something small. The field I chose, oncology, we think has about 100 to 120 different cancers, and each one has a different reason they happen, and each one has to be treated differently. So my hope was that from the time I started till the time I finished, if I could have one of those that I could make a difference, then I would feel like I've done something and left behind something. What I didn't realize is, although I was a good researcher and good academically, I also had some latent business skills. And those business skills came out in Texas. So I met my boss, who was a doctor, but also an entrepreneur. And he said, Vinay, I think you should start a business. And I said, I came here to practice medicine. And he said, yes, you can do that, but let me help you start a business. And I did with his guidance, and that over time became a very large business. I hired literally hundreds of people. So one of the questions came up is, do immigrants create opportunities for other people to benefit? Do they create jobs? Do they add to the whole pie? They don't take from the pie, but they add to the pie. So in general, everybody has more. And if my story is true, and it is true, and there are other people just like me, I can say for sure that for somebody who had never met payroll, who had never even thought about hiring a person, to have a company that had a huge revenue line in oncology and gave jobs to so many people and created opportunities for cancer patients to learn. I started a magazine, which is still being published, called Cure, which is distributed in hospitals and is meant for cancer patients. So they get all the information they need. The internet was just coming when we started the magazine. To have the confidence to develop cancer drugs, it's an expensive process. Drug development is quite uncertain. Most cancer drugs don't work. And after investing years of work and uncountable amount of money, you may not have a drug that can fight the cancer. But I got the confidence that we should do whatever we are given to do. As I think the senior Bush said, to those much is given, much is expected. And I have received so much more that my wife, Kanika here, and myself ever thought we would have. Warren Buffett said something yesterday. He gave $2 billion yesterday to the Gates Foundation. And people were praising him, and they were saying, look how special you are. And he says something that has stuck with me, and actually I read a lot what he says. He says, I've never given a dollar that I needed. And my wife and I feel the same way. We still haven't begun to give. We haven't given a dollar that we needed. He said that somebody gives money and they don't go to Disneyland. Now that's real giving. When you're giving something that gets out of what you would otherwise need. So I think I would give almost the entire credit of whatever success I've had to the people I have met. People who have seen in me more than I saw in myself. And I continue to meet people like that. And I want to be like that for the younger people that come to work for me. So hopefully only at the halfway point. Mm-hmm. So I'm by nature an optimist, and I believe in the goodness of people, and I believe in the human capital, like you were saying. I believe that people, when given the chance, will do incredible things. And I see that every day, and I see that all the time. And we work with the Dallas Independent School District, and I always enjoy going to elementary schools. And we give them simple devices, Kindles, book readers. So these children, many of whom predominantly come from Mexico and some other Latin American countries, at home they don't speak English. Some of them are shy because they feel uncomfortable with the language, and I never really understood their challenges. You give them a book reader, which reads to them. The Kindle has a little thing called text to read. So they understand how words are pronounced. Suddenly they're not shy anymore. They can touch a little button, and each word's dictionary meaning is given. So I sit there and I see those young children, and I feel like here's the future generation. Here's the next generation: doctors, astronauts, sailors, Wall Street bankers, everything, movie actors. And I know there's a big immigration debate going on, but there was always an immigration debate. When I came in '84, Reagan passed the big immigration reform in '87, and it was also called an amnesty. And there was all this concern. And all those people assimilated, and they've become a part of the society. And that's a non-issue. We have a big debate going on right now, and it's right to have a debate. In a democracy, debate is what you need so that everybody says what they believe in, and then hopefully there's a consensus. But I'm very optimistic that this debate will result in a law that we think is fair and correct, and these 10, 11 million people that have an opportunity to become Americans, they will become a huge part of the success of this country.
I wonder if we can get a small consensus on what happened within the Castro family to produce these two sterling examples of public service, as well as your siblings. So you two can fight it out in public about what it was about your family, what it was about your parents' experience, what it was about your growing up that enabled you to do the things you did and to give back in the way you have.
Let my older brother go first.
Well, I'll take a first crack at it, but it's pretty hard. But it goes back to, both my parents. My mom is a very strong individual. And like I said before, she wanted her children to come to the country where she was born. And she wanted her children to be successful, and education was a way toward success. So that was her primary driver. We were fortunate, very fortunate, to come to a place like Old Glory, because Old Glory, Texas by itself has a history. It's an immigrant community. It was settled by German immigrants in the early 1900s. And we were fortunate to come to this little community because I think there had to be a linkage between us and the community that we came to serve. And so we quickly, as children, we quickly learned English. I think it took me 2 months to be able to converse with the other children in my schoolhouse. We came here in March, and by May I was fluent in English and I could understand. I learned reading tip and mitten, okay? But for us, it was all about education and about not wanting to fail my parents. I mean, they sacrificed all to give us the opportunity. It was when we came here, it was a promise, not a promise, but a promise of opportunity, a future opportunity. And that has always been a driver. And the large family that we had, I mean, oh man, you had to compete with the others at the table, you know?
Well, let's hear the version from the younger brother and see if he has a different version.
Well, I mean, that's pretty much the way I see it. Our mother and father had no education whatsoever, but somehow they knew, and they've always known, how important education is. I spent probably, 10 summers hoeing out in the fields with my mom and other siblings from the time I was 9 years old, and I think the last summers when I was 19. And we talked a lot about the opportunities that we had here in this country. And so my mother always said, you can be whatever you want here. And that was an opportunity that we wouldn't have had anywhere else. So we all of us grew up hearing that. And so as we graduated from high school, and of course everyone did, when we graduated from high school, it was just a foregone conclusion that we were going to go to college. My mother and father didn't know to be able to instruct us, about colleges and majors and classes and or anything like that. So they always left those choices to us. And it became a lot easier for me being sibling number 5 because there were pioneers in my family that had gone in front of me. Our oldest brother, the first one to go, I'm sure it was extremely difficult for him. And we would all, as a family, work together and pitch in to send money and get him through school. And then the next brother, and then our oldest sister, and then my brother. So we just all took turns doing that and helping each other do that. Our next younger brother is a physician. Everyone in our family except one has a college degree or higher. But it was that instruction that we had from our parents, even though they didn't themselves receive an education, they knew how valuable an education would be. And so we just instinctively, in a way, believed we could just go on and keep going to school as long as we wanted.
Mm-hmm. And let me bring this full circle back to Miguel Howe. And if you could just say a few words about how, as an institution, the armed forces help develop and respond to these qualities of judgment and decisiveness and leadership and so on, and how the people who come up through the ranks can in turn benefit from those and serve the country and serve future generations.
Maybe I'll just give one very small, compelling example. And so I was recently going through my transition assistance program, or TAP class, that all service members go through, and whether it's after 3 or 30 years of service, to help you with your transition from your military family back to your community. And there was a young man sitting in that class with me. He was a young sergeant, ranger, at a ranger school. And we were talking about all of the opportunities that are now available to him. Anything that he could do, and he was looking at going home and being a cop in Chicago, and a lot of service members kind of gravitate to the marshal service outside of the military, so being peace officers or fire rescue. And so we just started talking, and then there were some other, I could tell that he had a desire to continue his education, to teach and to influence young people. And then he even had a little entrepreneurial flair to him. So I said, why aren't you looking at that as well? And he said, hey, sir, why would anybody ever want to hire me? All I've ever done is lead people in a firefight in Iraq. And I said, are you kidding me? Where else can you better demonstrate, probably much like a surgery room, dynamic situational awareness, judgment and decision making. And so that's the kind of cauldron of pressure that, lives literally at stake. Mm-hmm. So you just need to think bigger, much as the Castro's parents inspired them to think larger, about what opportunity is there for you, because by nature of your service, whether it's the training and the education and the leadership opportunities and that cauldron of fire that you've experienced, you have been developed in ways that you do not yet appreciate that are directly applicable to anything that you want to do.
Well, I think that's a very inspiring note on which to end. But